All right, hello. I want to welcome Dr. Saade with me. My name is Mary Cowan. We've done a couple of these webinars. Today we want to address just a little bit about career succession and being successful in imaging sciences. I have been fortunate enough to have several conversations, just casual conversations through a LinkedIn connection that I've made. And so we were having the conversation that we wish other people would be able to hear this information as well. So that's what we're here to do today. We're just going to kind of give some candid conversation about career progression and succession. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with us and to share knowledge with other people. I think that's a wonderful attribute.
Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure and a privilege to be able to share my experience.
Yeah. So would you like to give a little bit of background about yourself? We'll kind of go a little bit more into like career progression as we progress, but just give people an idea of who you are and what you're doing.
So I'm Charbel Saade. I started off with a Bachelor of Medical Imaging in Australia, and then soon after went into subspecialty of CT and MRI. And while I was doing that, I ended up doing a double master's degree because I was really curious. I wanted to know more. And then we went on and completed a PhD in contrast media delivery, became a professor in multiple universities around the world, ran big institutions in the Middle East, and now I'm the director for Asia Pacific for clinical education and applications for a pharmaceutical company.
Well, I would definitely say that is an incredible success. So congratulations on that. That's incredible. So I think I just want to start with a couple just to get to know you introduction questions. I think they're sometimes fun when I host guests. I often ask them, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, what were your aspirations? I mean, obviously as a little kid, you're not like, I was going to pursue a PhD. In contrast, so what were your aspirations when you were a little kid?
There was one simple pathway for me, was to help people and be the best at what I do. And I knew this would be a big sacrifice, but it was actually worth it, and it still is worth it.
Okay, all right. How about your first job? Like, what was your first job in an imaging profession? What was that like, or what did that look like?
Well, it was working in the biggest hospital in Australia. It was tough because in your first year as a radiographer, you're learning, you're putting your principles and practice together, you make mistakes, and then you have to start to deal with characters. You got the senior staff, they tend to kind of make you do the jobs they don't want to do. And ultimately, you end up becoming like everybody's punching bag. And it's tough because you're there to learn, because you really have spent so much time at university or college to get your degree, and you've done your clinical hours, but now you're actually at the forefront and you're just doing all the tough work. So, the portable ICU rounds, or, the midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning emergency radiography. And so all of that was really tough to do, but also it built resilience. And, and it's kind of keeps pushing me forward to the next level. Yeah, so it's quite interesting, actually. And that was the first thing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And the first year also, it's like, you're finally getting money, you're starting to feel stronger, independent, you're really feeling able to spread your wings and not worrying about, a little bit of money here or there. But then sooner or later that starts to change.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? Because I've made that progression too, and actually I'm an educator, so I have to help my students make this transition as well. How do you find that balance between, you understand that you're relatively new in the field, that you're going to have to kind of go with the learning curve, but yet how do you stand up for yourself without seeming like disrespectful to those people? Like, because you said it taught you resilience. So what advice would you give to someone that wants to, make sure that they're telling people what they really want, but yet they're remaining respectful by doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately at university or college, they don't teach you how to be politically savvy and how to deal with different characters. This is the biggest issue. Now, I'll take myself, right? I'm an Australian. I'm born and bred there, second generation. But if you look at me, I look like somebody who is typically not Australian. I've got a Middle Eastern background. And so there is also an element of, you know, people, when you first walk in, you're characterized, you know,
Sure.
it doesn't matter how smart you were at university, you know, and so how do we bridge that gap? Well, unfortunately, the senior staff will always think that you're their slave because they were someone else's slave, right? When they
Sure.
were doing the first year. So what's
Yep.
happening is this cycle is actually been going on for quite a while. Well, we're talking about
I
maybe
see a
60,
similar
70,
thing. Yep. Hmm.
right? And you know, the higher you go up, you know, you start to see the chief or the head radiographer or the head radiologist say, well, in my first year, I didn't sleep and I was doing everything for everyone. I was getting people coffee, I was cleaning. It doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
At the end of the day, we are professionals. And how do we bridge this gap? The first and most important thing is communicate. And there are certain key words to say when you want to come to communicate. So for example, when you have a senior radiographer who doesn't actually like you and you've done nothing to that person, and it's very common, they say,
Hmm.
go up to the geriatric ward and do this patient who, you know, has, and you know, this patient is like completely curled up and you can't get a plate under their back and you've got to do a portable chest and a portable abdomen, makes
Right.
life crazy, right? And you've only
It does.
been out for 3 months and you know you're going to stuff it up and you know,
Yeah.
so you just say, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it my best. But you say to that person, I'd really appreciate it if you could actually show me your skills and technique because I have not developed them yet. So in a way, they can't say no to you. In another
Hmm.
way, you humbled yourself because you're learning more.
Right.
We kind of got to get away from the perception of, I don't know anything, because they might go and start gossiping. So that's the last thing you ever want to listen to or worry about. See, remember, in your first year, the whole focus is building your knowledge bank. And knowledge bank now is through practice. It's not through education. So it's these people that you need to draw from them and be able to convince them. And every person's going to be different. So there is an approach. Even the person that you don't get along with, there's always an approach. You say, look, I really appreciate it. I'm going to do it and I'm off, but would you mind, because this is my first time? And as soon as you say that, automatically, you know, that person has no leg to stand on but to help you, because if something goes wrong, they're now accountable.
Yeah. I think that's even applicable advice, even if I'm dealing with someone in a senior management position and I'm just starting as a leader. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be even career entry level. I mean, that approach would work at any level that I'm refining my skills. I want to become better. So I think that's an applicable approach at really any level. But I do like the fact that you're talking about breaking that continual cycle of, you know, we're all playing on the same team here. And I like the fact of sharing your subject matter knowledge with other people. That's a great insight.
Absolutely. And one
Yeah.
thing that's really important to also pay attention, at the end of the day, you're a human like they're a human. And you got to be able to communicate. And if you can't communicate at that level, well, then maybe we got to start building communication skills. And what's even worse, senior staff members potentially could have really bad communication skills as well, but they haven't taught themselves. So always kind of look at, when you want to grow and you want to lead the industry, you can lead from your first year. All you got to do is you got to keep evaluating yourself and saying, well, what do I need to do to get better? And these are the hard questions and maneuvers we need to do.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think it is one of those self-reflective things is I need to become better at my communication styles, or I need to adapt my communication styles to, you know, who I'm dealing with or who my audience is necessarily. And someone might be more receptive than others, but I still think it's a great skill set to be able to pick up and continually still self-reevaluate that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I had a question about what was your first boss like? Do you remember the first person, or maybe even do you have a favorite boss or someone that you really feel kind of tucked you under their wing and helped you along?
Oh, great question. Amazing question. So in your first year, yes, you have the chief radiographer or the chief tech, but they're
Hmm.
not your boss. They're usually tucked away in meetings and offices. So what ends
Okay.
up happening, everyone becomes your boss. And you got to know, you got to know the fine line on how to deal with that. And I tell you how. So normally, you know, people that, if we look at characters and human nature, there's a form of narcissism in everybody. And you got high grade, moderate, low, and very small. And depending on if they want to control you to say, oh, he's mine and he's part of my group, or you fit into this group very quickly. So this is how the little bosses and the bossy people end up evolving and growing up in a department. So that is a tough thing to be able to watch very quickly earlier on. But the most influential boss, her name is Shakun. It was in my second job where I worked in a big trauma hospital.
Okay.
It was a lady. She, till today, I call her for advice. I'm so grateful to her, and I am a product of her leadership. And what was the three important things of her leadership when she took me under her wing? First and foremost, she recognized talent. Now, when she wanted me to head CT and MRI at the ages of 21, I was a baby. I mean, I just got out of university. It's been 2 years. But at that point in time, she said to me very simply, I know you can do it, and you're the best person for this job. And you don't worry about age and hierarchy. I'm giving you this opportunity, make the best of it. And I'm here to help and support you every way. Just those, 2 lines, it really just inflated, and it actually lit this fire inside of me to be ahead of the pack, need to learn, because I'm going to have to support people older than me, and I'm a young guy. So, and it's tough, right? The second thing was, I learned, more importantly, was her humanity with our colleagues. And let me tell you about humanity. Now, in our industry, we have a lot of ego. We have a lot of people that like to hurt other people directly or indirectly, knowingly and unknowingly. And, she would say to me, she goes, look, sometimes these people, this is who they are. You're not going to change it. And, with this approach, if you're going to fight back for every little thing, you know what? You're going to have a hard time in your life. It's like carrying an empty cup with a straight arm for 1 hour. You're going to get a lot of pain on your shoulders. So why would you want to give that energy and that attention to something like this? You're a bigger person. We're professionals, and we're always here for the patient. And of course, we work and we respect each other. And I think that was the second greatest knowledge. And I think that's one of the hardest things that, to master over, your career. And the third and most important thing is always laugh. We are working together, 8 to 12, maybe 16 hours a day. But if you don't laugh, you're not giving this positive energy around you, because when you walk into the room and you see that patient, 2 things happen. You could be the last person that patient sees before they pass away. It's very possible, even if you're doing a portable X-ray. And the second thing is, patients are looking for a momentary point of happiness where they forget that they're not well. And so those 3 simple but really huge concepts, if you can master those, you can be someone great and you can bring the world together. And I've really used them, and she has been one of the most amazing mentors I've seen in my life. And every big meeting I get invited to lecture, and I see her in the audience, I always ask her, could you please stand up? And I say, this woman is actually, responsible for my success. And because you have to juggle things a lot, you have to deal with people, you have to deal with people attacking, you have to deal with so many things. And she was one of the greatest and most influential person I have in my life, and especially in my clinical career as well.
I love that. That's a great, to laugh is absolutely, I laugh numerous times a day. I love that advice. I really appreciate the fact that if she's in the audience, you ask her to stand. I'm getting to that point where I've also built those mentor relationships, but sometimes I have a hard time giving back to those people. I'll get off a phone call with one of them, and I'll I might send a card or something, a text, thank you so much, but I never feel like thank you is enough. So that's a great attribute, a great way to give back to her and to recognize her, because sometimes I feel like these people have all helped me along, but I'm not giving them enough, adoration. So that's a great, I love that. That's great advice too.
Just
How
one
about
thing I'd like to add. Sorry, just one
No,
more thing I'd like to add.
go ahead. No, you share whatever you'd like. That's what we're here for.
One thing that Shukun taught me, and I kind of worked out. She said to me, "Look, Charbel, you know, you will either inspire people directly, and you'll see it and know it, and there is all of those people that you secretly inspire, but they just don't know how to show it." So
Okay.
you have an obligation in the way you talk, the way you react, the way you actually communicate, the way you deal with patients, staff, with colleagues, the ones that you love, the ones that you don't get along with very well. Even though these people will or won't like you or anything, secretly you inspire them, because then this is the strongest form of leadership, because people either want to be like you or they will
Mhm.
try and push against you. And it's just the simple things, the simple things.
Yeah. I find that too. Sometimes I will break out just like all my professional leadership training and everything I've been taught, and I don't feel like it goes very well. And then the next time I will do something like the simplest touch, the simplest comment, anything, and that people will take it to heart, and I'll be like, what? That worked? Like, that's what all my textbooks say. That's not what I was taught. So I think even in those moments that you don't necessarily feel like you're inspiring someone, you probably are in some way, shape, or form. So that's a
Absolutely.
great observation. Yeah.
And that comes under
Um,
the humanity card. Definitely. It
yeah.
comes under the humanity. We're humans. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely a great perspective. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that when we are working, those 8, 12-hour shifts, or you're tired. That's one other thing that I've probably learned is that I'll have an interaction with someone, and it doesn't have to do with me. It's not me. There's so many layers underneath probably what that person is experiencing or what they're doing, that I can walk away and be like, okay, I'm gonna try that again some other day. So
Exactly.
yeah. How about you talked about maybe a professional relationship. We talked about that. Um, how about if we move on to, do you have anything else you want to share as far as like kind of your life story, or maybe like what education was like for you growing up? Or I know I spent some time in Melbourne at Monash, and I was really intrigued at how the education system worked. It's a completely different facet for you than it was for someone in the US. So can you just give
Right.
like a brief explanation of what education was like for you growing up?
Yeah. So in Australia, when we did medical imaging, we did problem-based learning. You got taught the structure 1, 2, 3, 4, but then in order to learn it properly, you were assessed based on problem-based learning. And that's kind of flipping the table on education. So it's kind of really trying to reset the neural pathways in your mind, that you understand something in one path, but when something like this happens, how do we adapt and how do we change? Because medical imaging is all about compromise. We compromise with our patients to get good studies. We compromise our patients who have really bad shoulder pain, but they can't lift their arms up for a CT. We compromise with our patients who are vomiting and sick, but we need to get them to stand up so we can do a beautiful chest x-ray for them because they've got metastasis in the lung. So it's all about compromise, and that's the beauty of how you learn through the education system. But there's one thing I want to touch on, and it's probably very sensitive to the audience. In life, people are going to tell you you can't do it. So in my first year, I came, in the top, couple of students in the university when I graduated, got into the best hospital in Australia. I worked there for a year, and the people around me, they saw me that I was focused, I was learning off everyone, I was taking a lot of heat from people, but I kept cool and calm, and I did what I had to do. And people would always tell me, you would never make it. You're not good enough. Now
That's
that fueled me, and I'll tell you how
yeah.
that fueled me. Because when they told me I wasn't good enough, I wanted to go into the next modality like CT or MRI. They said, no, you're not ready yet. And I said, how do you measure I'm not ready? And please let me know what I need to do to get better. When they couldn't answer this question, how for me to get better in order to get to where I need to get to, I actually resigned and went to another hospital. And when I resigned and I spoke to my boss, my first boss, I said to her, I'm going to come back here as the boss one day, and it's going to be a lot sooner than what you think. And my boss, she was actually nice, but the people below her, they said, and that was my first boss. Her name was Karen. She's lovely. They said, he'll never be back. He'll never do it. He'll never make it here. So when I went back to another institution where I met Shakun, and she taught me how to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah.
That is where the hard work kicked in for me. And this is where the opportunities came. And I grew so fast. 5 years later, when I walked into my boss's office, Shakun, and I told her I'm going to resign, I got a very big opportunity back in my old hospital. She started crying. But then she hugged me and she said, I'm so happy for you because you're going to go back and show them who you really are. And this is the people that we want to build. You see, when it comes to teaching, our next problem in our industry is no one teaches you everything because they're afraid that you're better than them, you have a better character, or this is how we've always done it, or they fear that you're going to take their job and you make them look worse. And so when I had this opportunity to go back and I walked in, Karen, which was again my first and then my third boss again, she looked at me and she said, you were right. And she goes, we actually poached you because you had become the best in Australia in cross-sectional imaging. So when that happened, when I came back, the same people that really, put heat on me and said to me, you're never worth it, they were like, they couldn't believe it. And the whole reason why I'm saying this, it's all about hard work. And sometimes we have to make a decision which is going to help us in our career. But when you make these decisions, be open-minded as to what is it going to do to make you a better person, clinically, technically, and also humanitarian-wise.
Okay.
And then when I was there, then I got my PhD. I was publishing a lot of papers in the Radiologist's Journal. And then the radiologist comes up and he goes, why are you doing this? You're just publishing papers, means nothing. You're just a radiographer. I said, thank you for that comment. I appreciate it. Tell me where I've gone wrong and help me. And again, this was another comment that kind of woke me up. And remember, in large institutions with history and, great, beautiful names and whatever, these institutions end up having the most bureaucracy and the most struggle. So then I said to myself, I think it's time I become a professor. So at the age of 30, I was actually given 4 professorships in 4 different countries in the world. And then I moved to run the biggest hospital in the Middle East, and it's a hospital and medical center and university, and also chaired the medical imaging sciences program. And so just by doing that, I ended up publishing more than 100 papers. You see, the thing is, when people tell you don't, or you can't, or you never will, it's okay. Go and have 2 days of crying if you want and feel upset. This is normal. We're humans. We have feelings. But guess what? Get back up and prove not to them. You prove to yourself that doesn't matter what they say to you. You'll always come back harder and stronger. Otherwise, their comment will haunt you for the rest of your life. And so, this is the important thing about workplace and learning. You have to step outside yourself and start teaching yourself how to take the blows. And when you can take the blows, how do you get back up? Okay, and how do you keep pushing forward to show that you can do this? Now, no one can do anything on their own. I'm telling you, including me. I've had so much amazing people in my life that helped support and mentor me. You guys have an amazing person like Mary, who's in the US. So with these types and with this seminar, this is a form of education. Being able to not only test yourself and push yourself, you're also giving back to humanity because you've just made something better for the world. So you've walked into the world as X and then you left it a little bit more better. No one, you can't achieve greatness as someone who is, in a short period of time. It's going to take time. And it's all the small steps that ends up winning you the race. But believe in yourself. Yeah, but believe in yourself, really do.
I always tell myself I'm either winning or learning. The only way I'm ever losing is if I'm not learning. So I'm like, okay, are you winning or are you learning? And I have to decide about that. Yeah. And
I love it.
Yeah, and absolutely, you need other people, and you need to, especially to create that humanity, and to start with that. People ask me, what's the biggest thing you learned from getting a doctoral degree? And I often look at them and say, I learned that I don't know everything. That's what I learned. Just from, there's so many different lenses of things and ways to look at things and ways to reach people. Even through self-development and growth, and really, like you said, giving back. And sometimes it's just the littlest inspiration that changes someone's path or direction. And so I applaud that. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. So
I'd like to tell you a little story about my PhD. Okay,
I'd
so
love to hear that.
Okay, so when I was coming to, I had a few universities in Australia, and I can't say their names. They came to me and they said, we'd like to offer you a scholarship to do a PhD. Because at that time I was big at clinical, going around to the conferences for radiographers and radiologists, showing them these new techniques and so forth. So I got this opportunity, and so I went to this university and I sat down with the chair of health sciences, and I sat with the radiologist, who is also a part of the faculty, and he gets a lot of grants for research. And so he told me, he sat down and we were having this meeting, and he told me, so what is your, what do you want to do here? So I told him I have these formulas I've developed for, CT and MR, and they're very simple to follow, but we reduce consumption of contrast media by about 60%. I reduce all the artifacts and radiation dose reduction. And he said to me, nah, don't worry about that. That's not good enough. Come do my research. Again, the slave component came in. So when that started to happen, and we're in this discussion, I let him talk, and I said, okay, well, tell me about your research. And he's like, oh, we're doing this molecular stuff. And I'm like, but how does that help the patient now? Time is not on our side. And he's like, no, don't worry about what you do. Come and do what I do. So I got up off the table and I looked at the chair, or the dean of health sciences, and I said, thank you very much for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't see eye to eye, and already at the beginning, if they're not even listening or considering what I have to say about my research and what I've done, this is not what education and leadership is. So when I walked off, I turned around and I said to him, this is the biggest mistake you've made in your life. And so I went to another university where they gave me the opportunity. They sat down with me. They said, look, Charbel, we didn't even understand what you said, but we believe you can do this. We're going to give you the tools. Just show us. We're not clinical experts. You're the clinical guy. I'm like, great. After my PhD finished in 4 years, I had 16 publications in the highest ranking journals in the world. And then I get an email once I graduate. I got an email from that person who had my interview with, that radiologist. And he actually said to me, that was the biggest mistake of my life. And I'm so sorry, but I'm so glad we've been watching you carefully, and we know you're going to do great things. If ever you want to work together, I'm always here. So secretly, in a difficult situation, I learned a lesson that I believe in me, and I was grateful for the opportunity. But when I went back and I worked my heart out to prove to myself that I know what I got, I can prove it, and I've done this thousands of times. The gratitude was when he wrote back to me and he said, that was the biggest mistake. Now, it wasn't the gratitude from, to say thank you to that person. I actually said thank you to me, because I was the one that did the work. I was the one that believed in me. I persevered, and I learned from being knocked around just to keep pushing. And nothing's going to come to you in life easily, guys. Really.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have the same. I went to my my dissertation committee and presented my subject matter, and they kind of looked at me and said, no, just get your PhD and then you can save the world. And I'm like, no, I want to save the world right now, and this is what I want to do. And
Exactly.
I kept pushing and pushing, and they finally approved it, and I did it. And at the end of it, it was extremely gratifying to do that. They're like, they give you a million reasons why it's not going to work, or why you can't do it, or why you can't. And I'm like, no, because at the end of the day, again, I was able to share that subject matter and knowledge with other people, and it changed thoughts, it changed processes. And so I'm like, you can do a PhD and save the world at the same time. You just have to keep going towards what you want to do. So
amazing.
Great.
And Some of the greatest techniques I've ever learned is someone who just has a certificate in radiography. They have some of the greatest techniques. You know, but you got to remember, learn from everyone at every level. You know, this is
Yeah.
the key. So amazing, Mary.
I
Amazing.
agree. No, so I like I said, I kept going too. So, but and it was at the end of the day, it's so. And when I get to share that with other people, it just absolutely it lights a spark in you. Like I just get going. I could just roll for hours on that. So I appreciate that spark and continuing to believe in that spark in yourself. So you can give back to others. You can create that in them too. So so
Absolutely.
that's leading into that when we talked about, some of the, I always tell people like, don't ever, go buy a $2 item instead of a $12 item. You don't know. I mean, some of the best things in life I found or done aren't necessarily, everything. So that's one of my questions was, how much training or education do you recommend? Do you, like I said, having a PhD has kind of taught me that I need to keep learning. I need to keep growing. So what would you recommend to someone just kind of deciding, do I pursue a PhD? Do I pursue a master's? How do you gauge how much education that you really should be pursuing?
Amazing question. And that is a question that each person who's going to watch this video needs to ask themselves, what do you want first?
Yeah.
Because when we go through doing a master's or a PhD, if you don't love what you want to do, you're never going to get over the line. And it's
Right.
simple as that. So how do we break this down? How much education do you need? Well, how much do you want to change the world? How much do you want to be recognized for what you have done? And how much do you want to shake up your industry to make it better for the younger people coming after you, because you will secretly inspire them? You never know where people are going to pop up to say, I love your work. I follow you. Oh, you're amazing. But you really don't need that, because you're really doing something for humanity, because the whole end point in this is we're going to be a patient one day. So if you have something good that you can give to make things better for yourself, and when you get to it, even when you're sick, you give gratitude to yourself. You say, you know what? I did that.
Yeah.
I decided to go with the blows. I decided to actually do a master's degree because I wanted to learn more. Maybe am I not equipped enough in how I'm thinking? And the more you learn, the more you broaden your knowledge and understanding and interaction. And you can go from a master's to a PhD. Let me tell you, my PhD professor or supervisor told me this. He's like, Charbel, you've graduated. You think you've done a great job? The hard work starts now. And this is, and it will never end. And not
No.
because I want to achieve this degree or this certificate. What is your why? And your why is who you are, and and put the end in sight. So if you're going to be a patient one day and you've got this new technique, find the right people, get the support, do the education, go to a master's. You want to prove it more? Do a PhD and publish in, for example, in radiologic technology. There are so many things you could do. There's so many pathways you could take. And the biggest thing I'll say is, the minute you get comfortable is the minute you stop growing. So in
Absolutely.
education, take it with both hands.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's sometimes it was okay for me to not know the why at times in my life too. I had to realize that I had to be, as long as I kept asking myself that question, I was continuing to grow. But I had a similar experience. We had in the PhD program that I entered, you submitted an application and then your chair selected you based upon your admissions and your research subject matter and things like that. And I remember speaking to, having an interview with one of them, and I remember a professor asking me, well, why do you want a PhD? And my answer to him was, it's intrinsically motivated. It's motivated. I want one. I want to do that. I want to promote research. I want to, move forward. And he's like, and he kept asking me specific questions, and I couldn't really give him an answer other than the fact that I want to do that. This is part of my why. I want to move forward with this. I want to give back. I want to, gain this momentum. And he ended up turning me down because I couldn't give him a pinpoint specific reason for why I was doing this, other than it's my why. It's why I want to do this. And so I was fortunate enough to be picked up by another dissertation chair in the same program, and we were an excellent fit. And again, I got to move forward with my research, but I think that's great to ask yourself that why. Why am I doing this? And even if you don't know the answer, you don't have to panic. You can sit back and reflect and think about the things, the interactions that you enjoy with other people. Even if I got a Snapchat from a student that I had 4 years ago the other day, just thanking me for being part of her life and for continuing to move her forward. And that's not, as much as I'd love to say she crosses my mind on a daily basis, my life gets busy too. And so when you get that feedback back and know that's why you're driven forward. So I love that.
Amazing.
Keep questioning the why.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we talk about continuing education, networking, but I often get the question, and I will admit that I was one of these people once in my life, that I was scared to death to walk in a room and network. I would go to a conference and I would be around all these people, and I would feel like my name tag should say something like, like I dressed myself this morning, like that's all I had to offer. Like, I got dressed, I showed up, I feel like I haven't done anything else, So what advice do you give to those people that are walking in for the first time and are just, I was scared to network, I was scared to, to do that. What are the benefits of just kind of going for it and putting yourself out there in a setting like that?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. Look, welcome to the big league.
Yeah.
You thought university was, 20, 30, 50, 100 in your class. Now you're up against the whole industry. And what's the important thing about this is I've always taught my students, and when I mentor my, my colleagues, I call them colleagues because we all mentor each other. Even I get mentored.
Yep.
They're humans too, like you. And if you have something, remember, whatever you decide to do, for example, in your learning, education, and remember, you become the expert in that area. So no one's going to know it as good as you. So you hold your head up high. You go and introduce yourself. You tell them who you are, see who they are, and break this communication barrier down, because you want to build you. And if you want to build you, you have to push yourself to do this. Now you have the introverts, extroverts, and passive and so forth. The fact of the matter is, maybe if you go to a conference, the first few 1 or 2 days, everything's large, you got these big meetings, you see these people get up there, give an lecture, and you're like, wow, I want to be like that one day, But if you just believe in yourself that you're just human and treat every other colleague as if they're your friend. I mean, you don't go jump on them and give them a hug and a kiss. You're like, oh, hi, I'm Charbel, nice to meet you. I'm from Australia, I'm a radiographer. Oh, nice to meet you too. I'm like, okay, great. So, and then to break that, you say, what's your opinion? And then choose any subject you want to talk about. Because when you're the young one there, you're there to learn. You're not there to teach. And you say, what's your opinion on, chest CT with contrast media when you're looking for a dissection? What's your point of view? Because I've heard about you before. And then boom, you go down that pathway. And this is how you stimulate conversation. Because remember, you all have something in common. We're all in radiology. So that's the thing that binds us together. And in learning from others, you grow as a person, and then you learn and you start to create a network. So I'll give you an example. So when I was 25, I got sick and tired of people. I used to ask them like what I'm telling you now. I'm like, oh, what's your opinion on this? People would say, oh, just do this, and they walk off, right? And it's going to happen. So I felt very gutted that people weren't teaching properly, professionally in our industry. So I went on and I created a website. And then I started running conferences myself. And I ran conferences like a third of the price. And let me tell you, I was scared out of my life. But I said to myself, I got to get uncomfortable. All right, I need to network. I need to show people what I've done. People will believe me or won't believe me. I'm doing my duty. And it's normal. You're going to have your haters. This is normal. Look at my face. I'll definitely have haters, right? I stand up at RSNA and give lectures, and people look at me and they're like, we see a Middle Eastern looking guy get up on the stage, and then all of a sudden we hear this Australian accent, like they're confused, right? Put yourself out there, network, grow, fight it, make a change to the industry, make yourself uncomfortable, master yourself, and then make the whole industry uncomfortable to make it better, not worse. And this is how you network. And this is the drive, the energy. And you know what? It's some people, they'll do it straight away. Some people might take 2 or 3 conferences. Just keep doing it and keep interacting, keep learning. And the best way to start with interaction is in your new job. When you start, for example, in a hospital or a private clinic, start talking to people outside your department. Remember, you have a common goal or a common theme. We're working in medicine. When you go to a radiology conference, we're working in radiology. So that we're so common. And there are typical characters that choose medical imaging. That's who we are. And we are the sum of our profession. So take those barriers down. Talk to people like your friends, and everyone's really relaxed at these meetings and conferences because, everyone's away from work and depression, stress, and you never know who you could get drunk with at the end of the night.
I learned that people, like, because I would go to some of these conferences, I almost have a celebrity awe with them. Like, I remember being in the elevator one time with someone who wrote one of my textbooks as a student, and I was just like, do I ask for their autograph or do I tell them hello or what do I do? I don't know what I do. So I love the fact to just, have that normal, casual conversation to start with, and asking their opinion is great because a lot of times they're thankful and grateful for you just being casual and giving them an opportunity to be, and then that mindset as well. So I love that because it's probably been 10 years since I've struggled with that, but I'll admit that I did at some point in my life where I was like, I don't know, and so I think that's great advice. Excellent advice. How about what about something that you would share with the younger generation, that if someone like walked into your office and said, Charbel, I've not even went to school for radiology, but I'm going to start going to school. Besides kind of what we've talked about, is there any specific advice you would give them just from a generational aspect?
Absolutely. This is where a lot of mistakes are made when it comes to medical imaging. And people, they start with medical imaging and they never understood it. Once they get in it, they didn't like it, they get frustrated, angry, and so forth. I tell you what happened, and this is very simple. Any student or potential student that walks into my office, I say to them, let's go back to think when you're 6 or 7 years old and you're playing with your toys. What were you dreaming about? I hear people talking about being a designer. I hear people saying I was a doctor. I hear people saying that I want to write storybooks. And the amount of things that came out of their mouths was like phenomenal. So what happened here was this. So when we start to talk about, I'm like, look, I mean, medical imaging is an industry that's beautiful, it's elegant, but it's also very tough and there's a dark side. There's the emotional stuff that we have to deal with, seeing patients sick, dealing with pressure and stress that everybody is under because we're working long hours. But that's not the beauty of it. I mean, if you wanted to be a designer and this was your dream, then the child in you that will fire you up to get through any challenge, to succeed in anything you want to do, will never happen. So if you look at our industries and jobs all around the world, medical imaging, medicine, pharmaceuticals, companies, and so forth, you see people there, they're just doing a 9-to-5 job. They're on autopilot. They suppress the child love in them. Medical imaging, you could be fascinated about anatomy and you can say, oh, look, this is how we see anatomy. Boom, you've got the child alight and ready to go. Or you could say, I want to do medical imaging because I know it would help me to get into medicine. Great. We'll teach you how to look at X-rays, CTs, and MRIs, and we'll teach you pathology. So there's a million ways you can actually encourage the person that wants to learn and come to medical imaging. And there's also there are a lot of things in our industry where we have some bad vibes about us, like radiation. Are you going to die from radiation poisoning because you're always taking X-rays? I'm like, no, we're very safe. In actual fact, you're allowed this much per year. We get monitored, and it's all a conversation of educating them. And about 4 out of 10 don't end up wanting to do anything within medicine at all. They end up going back to do their childhood dream. And then, you know, you have the pressure of people where, you know, it's prestigious. My father was a radiographer. I want to be a radiographer. Or my mum's a radiographer. I want to be a radiographer. Or there is the like, oh no, you need to go to this university, and this is the only choice they had left. So we kind of got to navigate amongst these, because sometimes then, you know, parents can end up getting involved, which is really, at the end of the day, it's up to the student in what they want. And our job is to unleash that child fire, because that will keep you going for the rest of your life. Trust me.
I love that. I think you have to search for that too in what you're doing. As long as you keep searching for that and keep doing that. My students kind of moan and groan at me because I make them do one thing a week that takes them back to their childhood.
Amazing.
I
Oh,
make
what do you do? Tell me, what do you do?
so the other day we built the respiratory system out of Play-Doh.
Wow.
They were like, oh, we have to play with Play-Doh. I'm like, one thing a week that brings you back to your childhood. We went outside and we played. I don't know if are you familiar with the game Red Rover? Red Rover, like it's just you
No,
send
I'm not.
someone over and it's kind of like playing tag, you know, outside. And so we brought out some radiation protection questions, and if you got the question right, then you gotta, you know, the team gotta ask to send someone over. And so
I
once a week,
love
I
it.
make them do something that reverts to their childhood. And so
Wow.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah, we
Oh,
have a
wow.
great
I'm
time.
going to use this. I'm going to use this. I love it.
So
See, you learn
yeah,
something new every day. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yep, once a week I make them do something. I made them take six key phrases from radiobiology the other day, and they had to draw a picture representing each phrase and we got out colors and crayons and everything else. And
Wow. Wow. I love it. I
yeah,
love
they
it.
moan and groan a little bit, but usually by the end of the day, and I'm like, and you don't, I think that's what they have to realize is like, you don't have to be an artist to draw the picture, to express yourself, to, you know, to, like you said, to find that fire in yourself. So I think you know, it's your job too, to make sure that you're continually finding that, continually bringing that out in people. I love that. That's amazing. So,
Wow. That's so
um,
inspirational, Mary. Very
yeah,
inspirational. I love
yeah,
it.
I
I
have a
really
great
do.
time with it. We really do. Um, so I think we'll just kind of if you don't have anything else to kind of add or to share, usually what I end up with is I ask people to, if they have a saying or something that they go by or they continually tell themselves, like I shared with you, mine is usually I'm like, okay, you're either winning or learning, and you gotta keep through this, you gotta keep moving. Do you have anything like that that you continually, you know, kind of live by, kind of tell yourself?
Exactly. So there's probably a story that I would say before, you know, giving you my one-liner.
Oh,
But
sure. You're welcome to share whatever you'd like.
so in 2014 or 2015, I was at RSNA. I developed this new nuclear medicine PET CT protocol to reduce radiation dose to cancer patients. And I got up, I presented this, and you know, there was the media was there because this was a big thing. I was doing pediatrics and adults, and PET CT wasn't very big then. And I developed this protocol, and we got good image quality results. And so we had a professor from a very astute university in the US, and we had one from Europe on the panel. And I was the last lecture for the day. And I got up there and I gave my lecture, and I said to them, as a radiographer, most of the audience started laughing. And I said, well, what's the problem? They're like, you're not a radiographer. I'm like, I'm a radiographer. And then I kept going with my lecture and so forth. And at the end of my lecture, the chairperson actually said to me, he's like, why bother going through this research? They're cancer patients, they're gonna die. And that is when I turned around and I told one of the strongest men in the world for radiology, the minute you become a creator and you know how to do, you know, how if people's gonna die or not, I'm gonna tell you something. You should be ashamed of yourself even coming up with that comment, because we have an obligation to actually do the best thing we can for our patients, no matter what situation they're in. I go, you don't know if that 3-year-old child will end up growing up to be healthy and is cancer free, or she's cancer free, and then, you know, all that radiation we gave will end up giving more cancer later. Who are you? Do you know? You're just using statistics and probability. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting on USA Today. I had a little interview. It went gangbusters over the entire industry. And I was the radiographer that everyone laughed at. and you never know where these things are going to come. So what I'm saying is, the higher you move up, the more you start achieving secretly and directly, the more you're going to get hits along the way. But just remember, stick to yourself, believe, and let that inner child just make you fly.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
yeah, so there's been a lot of controversies because I've pushed the envelope. So, but I'll tell you my one-liner, okay? And this is my philosophy on life. Start small, think big, it's time.
I love that.
Because you want to start small. And the reason why you want to start small is, if you start with a small idea and you put energy into it, it actually flourishes, and then you start to think big, right? So you're going up along this logarithmic pathway. And then when you get to its time, it's actually time to do something about it. You don't just sit there and talk about it and think about it. Put a plan, put a strategy, and move and do it, right? You fail, perfect. Next time you come to start small, you'll know how not to fail at the beginning of the process. Start small, think big, it's time. And when you say it's time, just take it on with everything you have, and never, ever, ever feel discouraged. Just take a look at yourself and say, how can I get better? That's all I
Well,
could say.
I love that. And thank you again for taking your time and sharing your knowledge. It's absolutely, it's refreshing for me. And it fuels that spark in me too, to talk to people like you and to share subject matter and knowledge, and to have these kind of conversations where, we can give back to the people and inspire other people. So I absolutely am extremely grateful and very gracious of you to talk with us and to share your knowledge base with us. So thank you so much for doing that. Very much appreciated.
It is my absolute pleasure, Mary. And, you, as one of the great educators in the US, along with all the other great educators, you also inspire everyone. And today you've inspired me as well. So I'm in ultimate gratitude to you. And I thank the audience very much. And I look forward to seeing you all, working with you, and seeing you somewhere in the world. And, together we stand and divided we fall.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.